Good morning. I am Liz White, a member of the Author Selection Committee. Welcome to our 18th festival and welcome back to Amity Gaige. One of our COVID years, Amity gave us a wonderful virtual presentation about her book, Sea Wife. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Amity in person and featuring her book, Heartwood. I think thrilled is the right word for the reader's experience of Heartwood. First, it is truly a literary thriller. The Boston Globe calling it the best thriller of 2025. It is also a thrilling depiction of the woods in Maine, the ruggedness and the beauty. And remarkably, it is a thrilling story of three women who are lost and need to come from their metaphorical woods. There's the nurse, a hiker who has been trying to regroup after working through the pandemic. The game warden, who's made herself indispensable in a man's world. And the retired scientist, who becomes an unexpected armchair detective. The novel explores imperfect parenting, compounding mistakes by clinging to fear or regret, and against the odds, second chances. Forgiveness is a concept that emerges again and again. Heartwood is Gaige's fifth novel. It became an instant bestseller and was a read with Jenna pick for April 2025. Her first novel, Oh My Darling, won a place in the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35. Her novel, Schroeder, was shortlisted for Britain's Folio Prize, and her novel, Sea Wife, was selected as a group text by the New York Times. Gaige graduated from Brown, where she studied literature and theater. And she earned her master's from the Iowa Writers Workshop. She lives in Connecticut with her husband and two kids, and she teaches creative writing at Yale. Please welcome Amity Gaige.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here in the presence of all these great women writers and these great women readers, and apparently 25 men, I think, are here as well, hopefully under their own power. Yes. I love seeing every one of you. This is an incredible crowd. It's really an honor. I'd like to begin my talk with a quote that brings me a lot of solace when I'm struggling to write. It's from Somerset Maugham. This is the quote. "There are 3 rules for writing a novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are." I've written 5 novels, Heartwood being my most recent, and I'm still searching for the 3 rules. I feel like one of them has to be just don't stop. There's always a brief window after I've finished a novel in which I feel pretty competent, like I've finally mastered the genre, and then when I start again, as I have recently, I feel like a drunk on a unicycle. I've actually published 6 books. My first published book was not a novel, but a book of poetry. When I was 16, I wrote a book of poetry illustrated by my own photography. It's true. I have never spoken about this in any of my talks, but I was pleased to be given the opportunity to think about it. But it was published by a small press called Landmark in Kansas City. And during Landmark's existence, it published 66 books written by kids for kids. One of my Landmark peers was the writer Dave Pilkey of Captain Underpants fame. Yeah, Google it. It's true. Being a Landmark writer was a really positive experience. Winners were given a college scholarship, and for many years I received royalties for We Are a Thunderstorm, and I still get fan mail for readers of the book, some of whom don't know that I've continued to write other books, that I sort of peaked at 16. The publishers at Landmark also helped us to coordinate a book tour. And even though I was still in high school, I was encouraged to visit schools the way professional children's book authors do. And I was allowed to set my own fee. I remember what I decided to charge for a full day of traveling from classroom to classroom, giving presentations, and leading writing workshops. $100. There's a great photo of me on my We Are a Thunderstorm book tour in my mother's borrowed blazer and a very complicated perm. One of my first appearances was in a kindergarten classroom. Now, I didn't know it then, but kindergartners are a tough crowd. One reason is because when you ask a question, every single one of them raises their hand, and most of the time they have no idea what they're going to say. I didn't know this, so I opened with a question. Can anyone tell me what a poet is? All their hands went up. I thought, wonderful, this is going well, and I pointed to a little girl in the front row. Hello, I said, can you tell me what a poet is? Yes, she said, a poet is the person who cleans the schools. And I really appreciate that answer now on many levels. At first, I took it as a kind of warning that poets, earn next to nothing and indeed need to nail down a day job. But now I like that answer because, of course, sometimes the poet is the person who cleans the schools, or draws your blood, or works at the local bookstore. And poets are everywhere, and they don't always present as poets. I began writing at the age of 6 or 7. I don't remember a time when I didn't write. I spent most of my free time writing poems, stories, and plays at my father's desk in his study. I feel uncomfortable talking about my single-mindedness as a child writer because, of course, most people arrive at their life's purpose later in life, and this is as it should be. I've had many moments of doubts in my writing life, but as a child, maybe just out of naivete, I did not doubt that I was a writer. I had in my corner a rabidly supportive father. He was a college administrator, and like a lot of people in academia, he worshiped expertise. When a visiting poet came to my 3rd grade class and praised the poem that I wrote, not my best, honestly, he took this as his mandate. He became my editor/manager. Some people throw a baseball with their father. Some people help their father in the yard. My father and I considered nothing more fun than an afternoon of revision. He pushed me to make the deadline for my submission of my poetry manuscript to the Landmark competition, which was very fateful. But by the time that came along, I had multiple publications in magazines like Cricket, Shoe Tree, and Merlin's Pen, if you remember those. And I was kind of like the Drew Barrymore of children's poetry. People thought we were weird. I remember a family friend gently suggesting that I did not have to spend my Saturday afternoons editing poems with my dad, nor did I have to become a poet to please my parents. I remember being offended by this suggestion at the time, though of course it stuck with me my whole life. Did I write poems to please my parents? Do I still write to please my parents, even though my father is long gone? If I was trying to please my mother, I can say that the recent success of Heartwood has definitely raised her profile in her retirement community. I love visiting her retirement community because it gives me the impression that everyone in the entire universe has read my book. But why? Still, why? Why did I start writing poems as a child instead of doing something else? Was it really to be praised and published? I remember that I wasn't a joiner like the other kids. I wanted very badly to be like the other kids. I just felt awkward, like childhood didn't come naturally to me. I craved friendship, but I was easily hurt, and so I kept myself apart because time in my own imagination felt safer and more satisfying. I was also very attuned to my environment. Like many of you who are my age, I spent many hours of childhood unsupervised and bored, but out in the backyard I was happy, digging and puddle stomping, watching the wind and small, eye-level beauties that abound in an ordinary yard. I was also attuned to the people around me. I could sense the sadness in my own family, even when they did not speak of it. In her poem, Those Times, the poet Anne Sexton, herself a writer as a child, put this beautifully. I did not know that all that would remain from the year I was 6 was a small hole in my heart, a deaf spot, so that I might hear the unsaid more clearly. I think I started to write poems because I was a sensitive person. The word sensitive contains both the upsides and the downsides of the condition. A sensitive person is easily wounded, but is also attuned to the enormous color wheel of feeling that human beings have been blessed with. A sensitive person feels life's too muchness. I imagine that the word sensitive describes every writer here today, and also many of you readers. Sometimes I get asked, who is my ideal reader? And I like to say, my ideal reader is someone who's going for a walk and sees a dead salamander or a dead bird and leans down and says something sympathetic to it. Honestly, I think my ideal reader is somebody who wants to spend all day in a chilly conference room listening to writers talk about their journeys. I write for sensitive people. I write to sensitive people. I want you to feel seen, and I want you to know that being sensitive, alive to all feeling, is okay. But I'm no longer naive. If you've read my novels, you know my characters go through harrowing experiences, so I should acknowledge that being sensitive often feels like a liability. Being sensitive can easily be used against you. The credulous and the empathetic will often be seen as targets to others. Being sensitive, especially when going through something globally catastrophic like a pandemic or a war, can make a person feel heartsick with helplessness and uselessness. What good is it to feel empathy for those who are suffering in a foreign war, or those suffering from poverty in this very country, if you cannot fix it, and if your small gestures of help are so minuscule? But I don't believe that sensitivity is useless. It makes you capable of joy as much as pain. On a community level, being sensitive makes you someone who causes less harm. On a literary level, it makes you capable of being entertained, moved, and improved by the characters who have been created by the greatest writers of today and yesterday. When I was writing Heartwood, I was only half aware of the fact that I was writing about, among other things, the condition of sensitivity. There are 3 characters in Heartwood, all women, and I'm going to introduce them to you in a little more detail than Liz did. My first protagonist is 42-year-old Valerie Gillis, who is solo hiking the Appalachian Trail. She's close to the northern terminus in Maine when she vanishes from the trail. The Appalachian Trail runs 2,000 miles up the east coast from Georgia to Maine, but the North Woods in Maine is the very worst place in the trail to get lost. The foliage in this part of the woods is so dense that you cannot see someone standing in front of you. The forest floor is a perilous surface of rotting branches and stump holes. We don't know why Valerie leaves the trail until late in the novel. We hear her side of the story through letters she's writing to her mother, her beloved mother, while she waits for rescue. The second protagonist in my story is a Maine game warden named Bev. Bev is leading the search for Valerie. She's an experienced and effective search leader, but there are 17 million acres of woodlands in Maine, and she cannot find Valerie, and time is running out. As the search drags on, it brings out the hostility of some of her coworkers and other community members who do not think a woman should be leading the search. My third protagonist is a tech-savvy 76-year-old woman named Lena who lives in a retirement community in Connecticut, completely stolen from my mother's retirement community, down to the floor plan. And she becomes fascinated by the case of a missing hiker, Valerie, and she does, you don't actually know for a long time how she is relevant to the story. And so Heartwood pivots, its form is, there's multiple speakers. It pivots between points of view of Valerie, Bev, and Lena, and others. And I think the real tension of the book comes from the fact that we, the readers, can hear the point of view of the lost person, and we can hear the point of view of the searcher, but the lost person and the searcher can't hear one another. Will they intersect in time to save Valerie's life? This is what keeps you reading. A comment I love to get from readers is, "I stayed up all night reading," or "This novel made me late for work." I'm like, sorry? As I'm not sorry. I wanted you to be immersed like that. And even if your suspension of disbelief is complete, and I've made it look easy, of course, there was a tremendous amount of learning that I needed to do in order to write a convincing story that might make someone late for work. And here's a short list of the things I had to research before I could write Heartwood. Nursing, long-distance hiking, the Appalachian Trail, the history and geography of Maine, law enforcement, lost person behavior, search and rescue protocol, the effects of starvation, life with neuropathy, military survival training, foraging, birding, fishing, and what bugs taste like. Delicious. I did hike several sections of the Appalachian Trail. People do ask me if I've done it, just not very much. 2 nights in Maine where I wanted to set the novel, and then 4 nights in New York State, just trying to get the feel of the trail and trail culture. I hiked the AT just long enough to smell bad. And to confirm the suspicion that I would never be one of the 25% of thru hikers that make it to the end. And despite the fact that I am personally way too much of a cream puff to hike the AT, I loved being around the hikers who were doing it in their own way. Despite the persistent stereotype, not everybody out there is a skinny, white, able-bodied person who looks like they stepped off the cover of Backpacker magazine. There are people hiking the trail with prosthetic limbs. And just last year, an 80-year-old woman completed the trail. It's never too late. 2 of the people I met out there was a 71-year-old woman named Oneida. That's a trail name. Everyone gets a trail name when they're out there. And 65-year-old Real. Real was named Real because she kept it real. She said what was on her mind. She also chain-smoked menthol cigarettes. So I was hiking near Real and Oneida for a couple of days, and I could always tell when she was nearby because of the clouds of mentholated smoke. She had a great southern drawl and a big laugh. And when I asked her why she was hiking the AT at 65, she said, "Better than sitting at home waiting to die," which I thought was actually like a great reason to hike the AT. In the process of writing each of my 5 novels, I've had a moment of recognition, a moment of insight that I'd been looking for without knowing it, some truth buried deep within my own heart that I needed to bring to the surface for my own healing. I had several of these while writing Heartwood. Rather by chance, I decided that my hiker, Valerie, was an ER nurse. She's hiking the pandemic partially to recover from the bruising experience of being a nurse during the COVID pandemic. And Valerie's trying to stay hydrated and warm, but she gradually begins to lose strength, and she's a nurse, so she knows what her body is going through. And so she spends long days of waiting, looking back at her life and writing these letters. And the buried truth I found is in one of her last entries before she must make a life or death decision. She writes the following: "The world and its people are too much for me. I'm crushed between empathy and impotence. I don't think I'm important, not at all. In fact, I'm embarrassingly insubstantial. Then why was I given this heart? It is so much more than I need. And I feel like I'd been trying to answer this question since I was 6 years old. Why was I given this heart? It's more than I need. Why were we given this tremendous capacity for feeling, and each of us born so pulverizingly alive? After all these years, I only have a partial answer, which is that maybe it is to read and to write and create art and consume art. Maybe it's to read The Antidote and The Girls Who Grew Big and The Satisfaction Cafe and The Great Man and the other exceptional books that I represented today. Look at this enormous community that's bonded by the enterprise. What we have in common makes us feel like the big extended family that we are. And maybe by this criterion, the heart is exactly the right proportion. It is not more than we need. And if after all I've said here, we still doubt the value of the condition of sensitivity, we can always take comfort in the following Oscar Wilde quote: "Be yourself. Everybody else is taken." And that's good news. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Amity.
Sure.
Is this on? Yes? Maybe?
I can't.
Colleen, how are we doing?
You're doing good?
Better.
Yes,
Okay.
nice and loud, Aim. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was wonderful. I think we'll have you write our promo for next year.
Sure.
I am Amy Ulmer. I am co-chair of the Author Selection Committee, which is very small and reads a lot of books. And I have the privilege of asking the questions of the authors this morning. So we're going to start with, Heartwood has a wonderful sense of place, and the Maine woods come alive as its own character. Was there a particular experience that first gave you a sense of the landscape as a living presence?
I went to Maine to walk around. There's a little bit of a backstory here. There was a real-life hiker who got lost in the same area of Maine. It's something that people in New England kind of know the story of her. And she was a 66-year-old woman who was hiking, and she got lost. And unfortunately, she perished. She wasn't found in time. And I was so fascinated by her story, and I wanted to go out and see where she had been. And I was led out there with a guide. We did go through bushwhack the whole way out to get the place where her sort of final campsite was, and I like laid down there and just listened and looked and also kind of felt her presence. And so I really, sometimes I put my own kind of body in a place, and that's how I get to describe it. So, because I myself have experienced that or imagined it. And yeah, it's a beautiful, there's a little cross there, and her white baseball cap. But this is not a novelization of her story, I should say, of course, so completely different. But the other thing I took from her, from Jerry's story, is that she's a nurse too. And yeah.
So that leads me nicely to a question I actually had. So how did you balance honoring the real-life event with crafting a fictional narrative? Or was that not even an issue?
The real-life event of Jerry's lostness. Yeah, I mean, I do, like when I do so much research and I learn about real people, I do feel indebted to them 100%. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, I listen to nurses, and I feel, and certainly the game wardens, and I do feel like a real responsibility to get it right. And even though I wasn't novelizing Jerry's story, I even felt that way towards her. Another thing I took from her was that she was writing letters as she was waiting. So those were three important things: the place, the nurse, and the letter writing. And it's really beautiful to, I haven't read any of her letters, but it's really beautiful to think about the kind of grace it took her to write these beautiful letters. They were like complaining. They were like, "I love you, I'll miss you" letters. That's how I feel that I would be in that moment myself. I would want to just tell people that I love them. Yeah.
Thank you. Mother-daughter relationships are a significant part of this story. As you said, Valerie writes her mother to survive being lost. Bev's mom is ill, and Lena is estranged from her daughter. Was that your intended theme, or did it just evolve from the woman in the woods? The woman in the woods.
Yes, no, that was my intended theme. Every time I start a novel, I try to come up with a story and also what the great teacher Marilyn Robinson called aboutness. What's it about under the surface? Both of those are central to me. So, I wasn't just trying to rush headlong into exciting outdoor adventure story. There's definitely moments of digression, of sort of thematic importance, and mother-daughter was my aboutness. I hadn't covered that topic yet in the novel, and it's so important. We all have a mother, and we all have this like fingerprints, a very specific relationship with her. I'm a mother myself, as well as a daughter, and it's such a rich topic. So once I had both my story and my aboutness, I was going to try to see how they would come together, and a lot of it was like blind faith that they would. And I think one thing that I got to was that physical disorientation can feel like motherlessness, so I think I explored that and brought it together that way. Yeah.
Did the title emerge from the mother-daughter relationships or from the forest, or neither?
The title emerged. It was one of those desperate moments where you're like, what should I call it? And you're going through the book looking for a word or a phrase. And I had Heartwood there on the very first page, where in the first letter that Valerie writes to her mom, she said, I would put, when I was little on your lap, I would put my hand against your heart, and I felt like that was I could feel your heartwood. So, and then I learned in the process of using the word that a heartwood is the kind of the inside of the tree. It's the structural strength of the tree. So the sapwood is the new bark on the outside of the tree that conducts nutrients, but the heartwood is like, as the tree gets bigger, the sapwood kind of is on the outside and the heartwood gets bigger. And I just really loved this metaphor, especially since I have women who are older, on the older side, that the idea that you could, that as we age, we develop a sort of spiritual heartwood and a core that keeps us standing.
So we all just learned something new about trees, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We learn about trees.
The story takes a turn when a paramilitary compound enters the landscape, and the novel becomes a heart-pounding thriller. Did you plan that plot twist?
No, I didn't. It's so funny. I feel like I accidentally wrote a thriller. I tried. I was definitely going for suspense and psychological suspense. And the book functions very much like a bunch of puzzle pieces, I think, that I'm hoping that the reader will put together. And so once I was writing the book and I had all these various puzzle pieces, I had to see what my plot twists would be, and not to give anything else away. But I was hoping that there was a little bit of discussion of, can the reader understand and put this puzzle together? I was like, oh my God, of course they can. And that's the pleasure. That sort of, the book makes some interpretive demands on the reader to put that mystery together yourself, put the pieces together. And then there's some puzzle pieces that are, red herrings as well.
Did you go to a paramilitary compound?
I can't tell you that.
Or you have to kill me, right?
That's right.
Okay. Let's see. Just lost where I was going. Oh, yeah. Beverly and Lena are two strong and independent women who are important to the search for Valerie. How did you craft these very different characters?
Of Bev and Lena?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, so Bev was a toughie. I love it when people say that she's their favorite character. I had a really hard time writing her. I was very intimidated. I was intimidated by trying to write a Mainer. I was like, of all the ways I wrote across difference, that one was really like the hardest. So Bev was a tough one for me because she's kind of like the straight man, and she's a dutiful, hardworking person. I found my way into her, over a lot of thought and time and exploration of herself as a daughter. She's doesn't have kids, and she doesn't have a partner, and she's basically there to kind of mother the community. And I like that depiction that there's sometimes people who don't have kids kind of turn that towards the community, and that's so important. So I kind of found my way into her that way. Now Lena, that was so interesting. She actually grew out of an Amazon reader's review. She did. I was doing, as I do, like looking for numerous memoirs, especially self-published memoirs about the Appalachian Trail. Everyone who hikes the AT writes a self-published memoir about it. And I was reading the reviews of those, and it was a woman. Of course, I don't remember her name, but she said she had read she was fascinated with long-distance hiking, but she was a 76-year-old woman in a wheelchair, and she couldn't hike herself, so she wanted to thank the writers of the memoirs for taking her along with them. And that's how she came about, because Lena uses a wheelchair. And also Lena I had fun with her because she's a real autodidact. She's very learned. She's got a lot of curiosities. And she doesn't get along with very many people at the retirement community. Her character arc was quite important because she is estranged from her daughter. I did a lot of thinking about whether or not how that would end, that character arc. But I feel like with a good ending, it's not always what the characters want, but what they need that they get. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This
You're
was great.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.